Just a quick little disclaimer-ish to start this off. So what was mentioned in last episode and is referenced also in this episode, originally the intention was to have this episode be both a discussion on Kiesniver and Little Witch Academia. However, of course, because it's us, we ended up going way too long over on both of them, and I kinda didn't want to make the video to be too long, so I ended up just saying screw it and splitting the two into two different videos. So in here will just be the discussion on Kiesniver, and the next video will be the second half with our discussion on Little Witch Academia. Thank you. Welcome back to Pulling the Trigger, another episode of this podcast long-running thingy where me, Stefan, and Mexi talk about all the Studio Trigger projects that we want to talk about, which is pretty much all of them minus some of the smaller things. Because if we decide to go through all of like the shorts and all of the animations that they did for video games and like trailers and stuff, we'll be here forever.
We'd be watching a lot of anime, but I mean, there'd be some benefit. At some point, we'd have to play a Shantae game, and I mean, I hear those are good.
We could watch the Toy Story special where they did the animation for the dinosaur guys.
Oh yeah, they did. Oh yeah, because they did the whole trailer within a game, and Nomura, you clever man, you do pull a hoodoo every once in a while that makes me laugh.
And that was like, I think at the time Kill la Kill came out, so they were like still up and coming. So that was something that they grabbed them right when they were still like early, like before when they were still niche.
Yeah, luckily for them, now they have a whole style all to their own. So now, like, if you want to have that feel, that like motion and power in a scene, like, you basically go to Trigger. And they've done like softer stuff too, because they also did that Steven Universe.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. Like, didn't they do Steven Universe thing?
Yeah, it was one of the musical numbers that they have. So it was when Sapphire and Garnet are all trying to help Steven learn to fuse and shit. I don't know, but it makes you cry. Well, they did the OK Go opening,
right?
Too,
that was it too. Yeah.
That's the another one where it's just everything moving so fast, so fluid, so quick. Then all of a sudden the show proper starts. You're like, okay. Here we is.
It's also Studio Trigger being like, oh, we gotta pay our bills too. We don't have a Patreon yet. Patreon doesn't exist, so we gotta take any job. But now they have a patron, so it's like, I hear they're doing. I don't know how much they're making off it, but it's like, oh, it sounds like they're doing like pretty well as like getting some good money on the side.
Always got to worry about making coins. What we talked about in the last episode.
So the good thing about this episode 3 is that now we can firmly establish that this is in fact a series. It's like, if you do the first episode and it's like, oh, I mean, like that could always just be a one-off, stuff change. If it's the second episode, when it's be like, oh, there's like, you can do 2 episodes, but it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to commit to it, but it's like 3 episodes. It's like, okay, yeah, they're sticking with it. We're going to make more. It's like, I mean, like at this point, we probably have maybe like 3 more other episodes left to deal with. So it's like, yeah, it's like, we're basically halfway there. Why would we stop now? So it's like, we've got more. So like now, for sure we've got more coming.
You can now 3 episode pulling the trigger to see if it's a shit anime or a worst anime. The choice is up to you, folks.
So, as you heard from the last episode, if you watched that one where we did our big grab bag on when supernatural battles became commonplace, Inferno Cop, Turning Girls, Ninja Slayer, and Space Patrol Luluco, now we're gonna slightly bring it down a bit to talk about a twofer. Although we're talking about
hopefully you've done your homework as well and you've watched Turning Girls as we assigned, and now we can move on to the assignment for this episode.
And we say it's only a 2-fer, so it's like we're only going to focus on 2 series, but I have a feeling we're probably still going to end up talking as long as one of the past 2 videos, despite how much less, because these series are a lot more grander in scale, and there is a lot more to talk about, which in 2016's Kiesniver and 2017 plus 2012 and 2015's Little Witch Academia.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the first one. We'll start with Kiesniver. A happy tale about friendship. JK, no, this is a show about pain. It's in the title.
Kiesniver, see, I don't want to say this is a weird one because I've been saying it's a weird one for a lot of Trigger series, but this is, I'll say, I'm conflicted.
Oh.
Kiesniver is the series, so far is the Trigger series that's made me think in both a good and a bad way, because I feel like this series does a lot in its short amount of time, and it's like it does something very different that even of like the Trigger series that I know of, like even going forward, it has a very different feel to it. It has a very different topic, very different theme, and it's like its approach to it. And I feel like in a lot of ways I respect what it's doing and I like the ideas that it's going for, but I don't think it goes far enough for what it is trying to say and for what it is doing, that I feel like it really could to like straight up fully emphasize what exactly it is trying to say and how it ends up.
Yeah. So I saw Kiesniver when it first was airing. Because at that time, I was familiar with Gurren Lagann. I'd seen Panty and Stocking. I'd seen Kill la Kill. So I was already on like the whole, Studio Trigger. Like I already had a lot of shows associated to the studio, even though I hadn't seen much of the online animation. So really, in terms of like the studio itself, I really only had Kill la Kill truly to go off of that. But I had the whole, style reference already. So I was really looking forward to Kiesniver. I knew nothing about like the plot or nothing. So I just went into it like, cool, we're going to watch the first episode. And so, I'm expecting, violence, speed, all of the whole grand themes that like Trigger usually likes to throw at your retinas all at once. And it was interesting when I watched it first, like all the way through. I wasn't disappointed, but I was shocked that it was like, holy cow, they made something different. And I actually really liked it. It was one of kind of my first opportunities where like something was not what I expected it to be. And it was really nice to see it, honestly, because it gave me something different to think about, where now, okay, if I think about Studio Trigger, I got some other things I need to be thinking about as well, in terms of like not just, deep dark lines and the big flashy red text. Like there are moments that it slows down to like a brisk 35 miles per hour. And, we get, like you said, we get some really deep things about human connection and how we bond with each other, and just even like questions on things like pain and sensation. Like the show goes it mentions all these things without really digging deep into these things, where, you're kind of just left with a show that left me, I don't know, I guess hungry at the end. I was like, wait, no, that's not how we're ending this. But, being able to go back for this and like kind of give it the rewatch, knowing where it's going to go, it really helped me out a lot to kind of like, enjoy the show and like take in the sides, take in, most importantly, the characters. Those are going to be the big things about this show, because this is an ensemble piece for Trigger. So, I'd say that this is a show that wants to really look at the power of friendship and see, how good and how painful that experience can be. But no, I've always really been a fan of the show. Even when it first came out, even when people were like, oh, that's the show that's not really Trigger. It's like, no, this is very Trigger. It's just Trigger in a different way. It's different parameters and different contexts for basically the same big Trigger ideals. But no, I thought it was really fun to get to go back and rewatch it, and now we'll be able to discuss here and see. What did you think about it?
It is something where it's like, unlike say Supernatural Battles, which is like, it doesn't feel like Trigger at all. Like Kiesniver, it doesn't have like the bombastic action that you expect in Trigger stuff, but it very like the style, the way that the characters move, their designs. It's like, like the even like the pacing of the stories, like this is very clear. Like you look at it, it's like, this is very clearly Trigger. It's not gonna go in like places that the other series go, but you can tell that this has their fingerprints all over it. And I think it's really interesting because it's like this series came out at the exact same time as Space Patrol Lulaco. Like they were both in 2016 and both airing simultaneously. Like there were one episode would air, and then like a few days later the next
they did it. They did the Danganronpa anime thing. They went one episode, then one episode, then one episode. That's
like
weird.
I know all I know is that Space Patrol started April 1st, 2016, and Kiesniver started April 9th, 2016. And then and so it's like I think it was one aired on like one day of the week, and then like the next day of the week, and then the following day was the other series. So it's like they had it was interesting because you have like these two very different types of series kind of going on at the same time. So it's kind of like it feels like. And I know Kiesniver was also, it said, like, I was trying to look into it, I couldn't find too much information, but it says that it was, like, a co-production between Trigger themselves, as well as also Aniplex and Crunchyroll, and so it's, like, a thing where, like, I know, Kill la Kill was, like, I know, like, Aniplex is, like, the distributor, but I don't think they're, like, straight-up co-producer. Same with how, like, Supernatural Battles distributed by Sentai. Ninja Slayer was distributed by Funimation. Same with Space Patrol Luluco. I think that was a co-distribution between Funimation and Crunchyroll. This one everything I've looked at appears that this is, like, co-production, so it very much makes me think that this was a case of those two, they saw Trigger coming up and they're like, oh, we want you to do, we want something from you, so they kind of gave them extra money to produce this show, and then they maybe have some extra money on the side, which they did to do Luluco, which was like, oh, like these 4-episode, like kind of like wacky insanities. So it's like, it's kind of a thing where it's like the Luluco ended up being kind of like the B project to Kiesniver, but in a lot of ways kind of elevated it in a lot, like just by nature of like what it's doing, and it's like being more of like a comedy and referencing to it. It's like, oh, that stuck up, and then Kiesniver ended up being like the other that happened. It was like, oh, this series that just kind of like it happened. It's doing something a little like very differently. It has like the director of this series, Hiroshi Kobayashi, is like someone who was like a side animator on Kill la Kill, and like whereas like Luluco was Inuyasha, like who was the Kill la Kill director, so it's like, oh, there is that kind of like more of a slight pedigree in comparison, while Kiesniver is like, oh, here's the other people of Trigger like now like taking the reins on a new series.
Exactly, yeah.
So there is like that kind of whole approach to it, and since this was my first time watching Kiesniver, and I literally had no idea what I was going. Like, I was honestly thinking that this was going to be some kind of like, just based on your vague explanations of it whenever you mention it, I thought this was going to be another mech anime. Like, just because I literally did not know like what.
Wow.
because you didn't actually explain anything to me, and I just knew the name Kiesniver. Like that for some reason that sounds like the name of like a mech or something, and it's like, oh, I know you got Kill la Kill has a lot of that mech stuff, Gurren Lagann, and it's like, oh, maybe this is a mech anime too. Who knows? And then it's like, oh, hey,
I like no, it must be a robot anime.
And then it comes up and it's
logic,
like,
my dude.
Yeah, and then I watched the first episode. I'm like, oh, so this is a series about emotional manipulation and physical pain,
relationship story.
And it's like, ooh, and it's like it's not even like in a bad thing. It's more so just I did not expect where this was gonna go, and it was like I wanted to know where this was gonna go, and it went in like real. It's gonna be funny because there are a lot. I'm gonna mention this as we go through. There are a lot of things about this that remind me of both other Trigger series and other types of series, and it's like, I'm gonna see like, oh, how one does in comparison to the other, and it's like just ones where I'm watching, I'm like, it just reminds me of like how this thing did it, and I feel this thing did it a bit better, which kind of like slightly soured a bit, just because I feel like yeah
that's the Kiesniver effect. Like, that's just kind of how it feels with a lot of its themes, just again because we'll get to it, where a lot of the stuff that the show brings up is amazing, and it's some of the best shit that should have been brought up in like 2016 animes, but then it just kind of stops, and that's where, and it's the stop. It's not that they brought it like you went up in the air and started doing a whole bunch of flippy flues. All you missed was just landing on your two legs. Like, just stick that landing and you got yourself probably a show that would have been up there whenever people talk about Trigger shows, been like, Kill la Kill and Kiesniver, and all. More people would know how to properly pronounce Kiesniver, I guess, than apparently, because I was mispronouncing it until I just watched the dub like for this.
I was calling it. In the last episode, I called it a Kiesniver, and then I watched the episode, and they're all calling it Kiesniver, and I'm like, I guess that makes more sense.
And it's super weird because, I mean, so again, it's a Trigger pun again, where I guess Kizu is a wound, and like a Kizna is like a bond. So it's a Bon Niver because they also like German as well. Like Trigger loves German as well. But I guess with the show itself proper and like the premises, now that we've kind of like talked about at least our emotional like levels on that. But I guess the best place to start would be actually the opening. Like let's not even touch the plot just yet. Like this, because this opening is doing a lot of the heavy lifting on when I say like I love Kiesniver. I like the actual amount of love that I have for Kiesniver and Kiesniver plus OP every time. It's drastically different. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, no matter what I say about the series itself, Lay Your Hands on Me is fucking beautiful, and is just like the way the opening, like, yeah, the opening, the visuals, it is just so different and just kind of so like aesthetically pleasing. And then the song is just like, I don't know how much of it is the song itself, how it's composed, how it's sung, slight, like, also plus like knowing like what happened to the singer of it. But it's just like lately I'll just kind of decide I'm gonna listen to it again, and I just start to get, my eyes start watering up. It's just it's just like a beautiful piece of just, yeah, it's just like it is paced perfectly. It's got like the version on like the album is like has this like gigantic build up, and it's hard to describe, but it just makes you feel it honestly, it perfectly represents, in like just music, makes you represent, okay, this is the type of series this is gonna be.
yeah, like it totally sets that mood versus like other Trigger openings, which are all usually on like the 11th setting up there in terms of energy. It's getting you pumped because, hint hint, some of them are going to be showing up at the end of that show. But no, Lay Your Hands on Me is serving one function, and that is to introduce you to every single episode with this idea that, you know, reaching out, that connecting is something to strive for. With this show, the characters go through most of their hardship because they're trying to like stay connected and stuff, and trying to get along, failing miserably at it, but still getting back up to try it again. And I feel like that's definitely like the message of the song, even into like just maintaining life as well. Kind of like what Stefan referenced. The whole reason I brought it up with Ninja Slayer, that I started tearing up just on that opening, is just, you know, it gave me emotions that the basically the guitarist and the vocalist for Boom Boom Sadlight, he had reoccurring cancer for a while, and he passed away months after the show aired. And so just hearing that information while the show was coming out, I guess I may have emotionally latched onto Kiesniver's back in the day and onto that opening. But it's super cool that like even without that context now, even after the show has had some time to like exist and for people to like look back on it now, I love that it's still just a beautiful piece, and it's still the strongest point of this entire show. With all the show has several good points, that OP is something that it's like, you know, it's what S tier is for. It's like you've broken the grading system and you need to be in this other category. The show also has a pretty great ED as well. It kind of touches a bit on the show, throughout the show, having a theme of the character's eye color, or just eye color in general, I guess, symbolizing emotion or symbolizing sensation and feeling occurring in a character. That's when the color of their eyes are at their brightest. And then like the ED is basically just all the girl characters with like super close-ups. I mean, it's not my favorite Trigger ED, especially after you got good shit like with Kill la Kill's ending, where it's like, you know, it's all the girls going on a date, having fun, not staring at the camera. Like, but I know that's also in the theming of the show of, you know, human connecting, and eye contact is going to be, you know, aside from literally attaching each other people through their pain, it's probably the best way to, you know, connect to another human.
Yeah, so just jumping into the plot and like just the premise and just everything about the series. So it takes place in this kind of like this fictional town in Japan.
Town? I'd go with city, because it gives me like Pokemon movie Metropolis Zone vibes. Like,
yeah, I was about to say it's like a city that's like it's like its own little like a pocket like right beside a big mountain, and there's a big bridge extending into like the mainland. Yeah, it's kind of you said it is very much like the city in Pokemon Destiny Deoxys specifically. That's what it reminded me most, because it has like kind of like it's semi-futuristic, but it's like still mostly modernized. But there will be like these little things like there are these weird mascots all over the place that are just kind of like normally just like, oh, like everyone's just kind of like, yeah, that's kind of weird, whatever, moving on.
The Gomarin, it's super funny because no one acknowledges them, but they do get acknowledged like at the end, and people are like, what the why were we doing this? It's like, yeah, no, same. I do the same all the time.
Yeah, so basically the way the story is centered, it's centered on this kid named Katsuhira, whose kind of main trait is that he's very emotionless, he's very stilted, he can't feel any pain, so he's like constantly picked on, getting like beaten the shit out of by bullies who abuse him because he can't feel the pain, so he doesn't react to it. And like his childhood friend Chidori is very upset about this. There's this kid named...
She is very upset about
this. There's this other kid named Hajime who tries to befriend him, try to be like he tries to be like the Mako to like just be like the very hyper guy who tries to help him out, but because of he's this emotionless husk, he just kind of like he accepts it, but he doesn't really like care, doesn't really feel anything.
And let us take the moment to also increase our Kamina recolor counter for Trigger for Hajime. Thank you.
I saw Hajime and I'm like, yep, that is just that guy. It's just the guy from Promare, and it's like that design is like, yep, that is a Trigger design, all right. So basically they that happens, and then he ends up meeting into this other mysterious emotionless girl named Noriko, who effectively kidnaps him, those two, and several of their other classmates, and
all from the same class.
Class. And basically puts them into an experiment. She plugs into things called Kizna, which is basically a device that allows each other to feel each other's pain. So if somebody gets hurt, everybody else also feels that pain. They get punched, everybody else also feels the punch. And it is all part of this experiment to see if these 7 people connected can they reach a further greater connection the more that they improve their bond and improve the power of that Kizna system, but also ultimately to see as this bigger grand plan to attempt to find world peace, which of course is like has a lot of, I mean, it's one of those premises of self where it's like, oh, these people are doing these things for world peace, but it's like, this is
it's one of the shallowest reasons. Usually for world peace is a shallow motivation for bad guys. It's even shallower in Kniver. Honestly, they could have just stuck with the whole, like, we're trying to just study human connection. That would have probably made it even more twisted, because then it would have been like, well, that's not even a good enough excuse.
And I mean, the first, 2 or 3 episodes, honestly, I feel like that would be the perfect Saw movie. It's like I know there's the whole thing of like, oh, trying to find new ways to do a Saw movie. It's like, no, it's like have all of the victims, have them had thing where like everybody can feel each other's pain, and they have to get out of the, like, they're basically being put through these tests, both psychological and physical. And need to get out of this. So it's like, oh, that's like a legitimately like super, like those first couple episodes, I was like, oh yeah, this is basically like Noriko is basically acting like Jigsaw. She's like making them she's forcing them to go through answer questions. If they fail, they all get tased, so everybody gets tased. And then it's like, oh, then the mascot people show up and start beating the shit out of them, and so if they get hurt, everybody else gets hurt, so they gotta go and fight them too. So it's like, and it's all taking place in this like abandoned hospital, I think. So it's
first too, because the hospital is super cool, and it's definitely where you get a lot of the Saw vibes out of it too. But I mean, it's kind of where we want to bring up that, this is where you start to see that, oh, this is still a Trigger show, because this show is still pretty violent. It's just not heroically violent. Like, we're not cheering for the character because the theme is playing in the back and they're doing a big climactic slash. No, instead, like you said, a bunch of mascots are coming in to beat the shit out of a bunch of high schoolers who are already pretty scared and already psychologically traumatized. And then, like you said, Noriko is going super Saw movie 6 and is like, well then, how about y'all start revealing your most embarrassing secrets?
Yeah, it very much, and it's also, there's also the addition that they decide that all 7 of the people kind of like, they're representing a modern version of a 7 deadly sin. So you kind of get the
these 7 sins are worse than the Persona 5 7 sins, and the Persona 5 sins are also incorrect. But these ones. Someone was cheating on someone else's homework and wrote the wrong things.
It's really funny. It's funny because it very much feels like again, it's hard to tell exactly because of how the story is executed if it was intentionally supposed to be bad or not, because it very much feels like Noriko decided on you find out later why Katsuhiro was chosen, but it's like it feels like the other 6 were chosen because it's like, oh, I feel like I need a reason. It's like she decided, oh, this person represents this sin, this person it's like she's determining that, like, because she's using her own kind of like warped bias to just like they don't
they're super judgmental. That's the big like flaw in like her whole patient selection, is that she just picked everyone based on her own preconceptions of all these people. She just thought that, well, I don't have emotions, so these are logical choices. Like, no ma'am, just because your emotions are being suppressed or whatever doesn't mean like you're still going to make perfectly rational decisions.
Yeah, and it's very much, and I do really like the character in a lot of ways. They are kind of like cliches, but I feel like, and I can tell at least like the series is very much aware of the cliches of these characters and very much plays into it, and I think they're able to stand out as more than just their cliches. I'd be like, oh, these are actually fun people, and it's like I like them. I want them to get along. It's not just you're like, oh, I want them to get along so they can get out of this mess. It's like, oh, I want these people to like each other, because these are like, even though in a lot of ways they are very unlikable people, they're likable. They're likable in a realistic sense of
they're not murdering people. It's like, you're flawed.
Yeah, their unlikability isn't that, oh, they're just annoying and terrible people. Their unlikability is, they're flawed. They are very much, they're sometimes egotistical. They're sometimes selfish.
Some of them are emotionally damaged. Yeah, it's actual human errors and flaws in that. I do like how, so Noriko, which, let's start with her name. That's totally a Gunbuster reference. Thanks, Trigger. We always salute you. And so, she picks all the other classmates based on like her own self-perceived like 7 deadly sins. And then when she introduces, when everyone starts to wake up after having the Kizuna operation performed on them, like she mentions that they're basically going to start completing missions, because the goal is the whole world peace scenario. But she mentions for just like one time that the most important thing for them is that there was all for one and all for victory. Like she changes the whole Three Musketeers quote and goes for the all for victory, and like something like that kind of gets dropped. It doesn't really, I'm not sure, because again, Noriko has her own like discovery episode where we find her motivations and we're like, oh, she was doing all this because of Y. We thought it was because of X. But no, I still thought the whole play on like the Musketeers as well there was kind of clever. But so she definitely picks, the person that's most involved in the Kizuna project in general, and obviously the closest people in relationship to him. So, that's how you get Hajime and you get Chidori dragged into it. But then, then you start to get the other characters, which all seem to be, your stereotypical anime tropes. Your pretty boy in the class, your quirky, eccentric, weird girl in the class, the silent story writer girl, like, ooh, she must be writing a mystery book, isn't she so interesting? Like, so you get these character setups, and it really feels like the writers of the shows were like, okay, so these are the usual players we have in an anime, and usually by 12 episodes they're best friends without really having shared any information. So I feel like it was really in the intention of Kiznaiver to really like deconstruct some of these type of character tropes. Like from the get-go, I love how they take like the whole quirky fairy praying girl, and like from the start her admission is that she doesn't even believe in fairies. She just doesn't want people to think that like she's perfect. She'd rather people think she's weird than think she's perfect. And so she is more than prepared to live her life in a shenanigans way. And I think that's super funny, because then at that point she still continues to like keep it up. And it sort of becomes this whole idea like human identity too, that like if you're going to play a role every single day of your life, then what's the difference between it like it being your personality? Like who cares if you don't believe in the fairies? If you're just going to keep spending all day praying to them, there's no difference. It doesn't matter. And so I think it's kind of cool because that allows then, you know, the other Kiznivers to, you know, honestly put up with her and then bond with her, because then this becomes the show initially about pain. It starts to become the show about drama and about like emotions midway through. And that's definitely a flaw in just the whole premise of the system when they start like trying to physically bond people, like, because it's funny because it's not even just the matter that they all share the same pain. They actually diffuse the pain. They mentioned that if one person feels the pain, it's actually spread out to everyone, and everyone experience 1/7 of what the initial pain would be. And in the first couple episodes, it's initially just, you know, that initial sensation of pain. We have a scene where Hajime falls off the apartment window and he's still sore because, you know, his actual ass got cracked and the cells have to heal themselves. But everyone experienced that initial fall though, but that went away for everyone else. Hajime's still left with like the physical wound. So it starts you see the limitations at first where it's just like maybe that initial spike in pain or like that noticing of pain. But as the series goes on, the Kizuna system kind of goes off the rails in a way that I thought was super clever, where it starts to bleed over, where, you know, what separates those physical sensations of pain versus the emotional and mental sensations of pain? It's still negative feedback in your brain. And so what happens is you start getting these episodes where aside from feeling each other's physical pain, they start to feel like each other's dread and each other's sadness, and you start to think that like, oh no, this is starting to move into like mind meld territories. We're gonna have to start understanding like, how do we control our emotions, because it's going to start affecting other people directly. And then the show doesn't really go in that kind of direction, really.
Well, they go almost, because then it gets to the biggest extreme, which is you get so connected you can start to heal each other's thoughts, and it's like it really like that is probably like the most like kind of like disturbing in a good way kind of like part of the whole series, because you have those moments of like the characters are able to hear another character's thoughts and they're like thinking something, and so the characters start being like, oh, maybe I should do what they're thinking, but it's like what they're thinking and what they actually want aren't always in sync, because humans and their beliefs and what they want is always so fickle. It's like it's never going to be accurate. So it's like, oh, when you have like Chidori crying that she wants something and then Katsuhiro goes to do it, she like turns around and is mad about that, because she knows that it's not only not exactly what she wants, but it's also she knows it's not completely sincere. And it's just this whole idea of like these emotions start overwhelming everybody to the point that they're all just lying on the ground in like the rain just screaming, it hurts, and it's like, what
writhing
the fuck?
in pain. To me, I thought that was probably like the most apt like way you could depict human relationship, human interactions. Like I would just show them the rain scene from Kizuna and be like, that's it, that's what it is.
And then there's also just the whole thing of like, yeah, because it's very much that case of these people like Noriko, and then you have like they kind of slightly, I wouldn't say completely subvert, but they kind of subvert like this whole idea of like you have like the mysterious organization behind the scenes that's like controlling the kids and like planning these like quote unquote nefarious things, but it's like it turns out it's really just Noriko. There's like the two of the teachers, and then they have a whole bunch of those like
Gomerins.
the mascots, but it's like we never see like who's in the mascot. Like they assume that they're people, like they don't imply that they're robots or anything. So it's like there are lots of them, but you never actually see all these people. It's the only people you see are Noriko and the two teachers, and it's very much played in the way of like they're trying to fund it, like that the idea is that the thing's been shut down for a while, and that they're trying to like fund it and like bring it to like they're trying, yeah, they show it to a bunch of scientists. They go to like the mayor to be like, oh, hey, how about we start look at all of our like research and like look at our progress, let's start it up again, and everybody's saying them no. No, we don't want this.
Please
So yeah,
stop.
yeah. So it's not. It's about like the evil organization who is trying to get back. Like they don't have power. They're trying to get back power, and it's like it's kind of like the funny thing of like yeah, like you see, and then when you see like oh later on when it's like why you find out why Noriko's doing this is like she has like I feel like the reason is very very misguided, but there's like a reason for it. Right. But it's like the other two teachers are kind of like this weird thing. Like they feel like they're just kind of obligated to do it just because, but it's like I mean like you have like the counselor who is like she starts off being like oh she's all for it, but then she's the one who kind of slowly but sure is like oh no we're going too far, and she wants to try and like resolve this. But then you have like the chemistry teacher who's like their main teacher who's just a fucking asshole the entire time.
he's
and
the
he's
worst
like
trigger teacher. There's no like all of Luna Nova good. This one, bad.
Yeah, and I'll get to it like near the end, but it's just the fact that like that he is like the absolute worst of everybody, and he effectively gets away like scot-free in the end is just kind of like what? It's just kind of like an oh well, I guess again I'll go into this more and more once we get like closer to the ending, but it's the fact that the conclusion is yeah, cuz this is okay, this is going to be really weird, but I mean, we already referenced Persona 5, but the series itself reminded me a lot of Persona 5 Royal, specifically like the third semester. So yes, for some reason, if you're watching this and haven't seen that, haven't played or seen what happens, I'm going to spoil that, but it's like the whole plot of that is that Marky gets the power to turn the
Spoiler alert for game. Be careful. Whoa. Yeah, but go play Persona 5 Royal. Now come back.
Marky gets the power to rewrite reality and makes it so that, like there's no pain in the world. Everyone feels good. It's like everyone gets what they want, and it's just like, it's a perfect utopia, and all of the main characters are like, no, this is wrong. Like you can't reverse people's feelings and like make them believe in stuff that isn't actually real. And it's very like I feel like this does it slightly better than what Kiznaiver does, which is in the fact that, but there is still that issue I have, which is that it feels like the story's treating it more as this is wrong and you shouldn't do it, rather than this is fucked up and this is like the fact that you thought it was a good idea needs a serious sitting down and talking why this is not a good idea. And I feel like with Marky, it's a thing of like, he had good intentions, but it's wrong, so that's why we stopped him. But it's like, no, it's like you reversed a traumatized girl's brain to make her think she was her dead twin because it was easier than having her come to terms with the fact that her twin was dead. And it's like, that God. Is like serious. It's a seriously fucked up thing, but it just kind of gets other than that was wrong to do, and that's it. Which is kind of like what I think.
That was cute.
Yeah, which is what Keys, because I feel like, like the fact you see how much like manipulating these kids, having them have to deal with feeling each other's like not only at their physical pain, but then their emotional pain. Like they're deep like rooted feeling, like forcefully connecting each other, putting them in these scenarios where they have to be together and have to kind of further along and kind of making them like do. It's not even like it happens naturally. It's like they are pushing and putting them in these situations so that these developments can happen in a very Saw mousetrap kind of
for world peace, dude. For world peace, it's not even gonna like work that way.
Yeah, a big puppet master scheme, and it just kind of ends with this is wrong and we shouldn't do it, rather than this is like legitimate this is legitimate.
There were some human rights violations in this anime, but that's okay. We made friends along the way, right? Right. Like forced to be friends.
Yeah, it's the whole kind of ramification. That's, I think, the whole ramifications of the themes, and why I think if this went darker and if this went further with what you could do with this, then I would be more willing to let it slide, because it's like, they're going to the places, they're showing what happened, like the actual, I mean, they do show some of because as it's revealed later, it's like this is the second time that they did the Kiznaiver experiment, and that the first time was Noriko and also Katsuhira was originally, the reason why Katsuhira is like that is because he was originally part of this of the original Kiznaiver experiment, where they had a bunch of
They had a bunch of kids.
They had like I think they set up to like 30 5-year-old kids that they all kind of did this just to be like, oh, let me see. But then there was essentially a glitch in the system that had it where Noriko was receiving most of the pain rather than like she was basically receiving all of the pain rather than just the small percentage of the pain. So it got to the point where she was so kind of like emotionally and physically screwed up by it that she had to take pills in order to make herself basically make yourself emotionless. And this in return resulted in several people like Katsuhira getting all screwed up, where he's also just emotionless and can't feel pain. And then there was like 5 of their other those kids that basically became
comatose, like all
comatose corpses, and you see that for the first time, and it's like, holy shit, this happened. This
is what we were thinking.
And you decided to do it again.
Yup.
And it's like, oh, but we did it. And you find out that it's like the reason why Noriko's pushing for it because she has this whole kind of scared mentality of she believes that the only reason people are friends with her is because that they were connected to this system. So she believes that, oh, the only way I can become friends with, the only reason she also has like her big martyrdom of like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to, because I can take all the pain, I'll take everybody's pain so that everybody can be happy. And if I do this, then everyone will like me. It is that very twisted thing. But I feel like the problem with Noriko's portrayal for me is I feel like she's portrayed as so unlikable for most of it that it's hard for me to like. I can kind of get because she's in such a screwed up position, but because she's so front and center and like controlling everything and putting the kids through all of this shit, that it's like it's hard for me to sympathize with her just because it's like she's so like irritating and just kind of, it doesn't feel like even by the end, it doesn't feel like she learns. It just feels like she stops.
It really very much feels like that. No, because I was thinking at least we could because you can break down Kisneiver's whole story structure into at least 3 arcs. So you have like the intro arc, which is kind of, the Chidori, Katsuhira arc. And then you have Honeka's arc. And then it goes into Noriko's arc. And I feel like that, because the show itself is only 12 episodes, it's going to be on the shorter side of Trigger shows. But I feel like kind of if you break it down into at least those 3 segments, it's kind of easier to see and digest like because Kisneiver, like you said, it's a lot of setup, and it's a lot of really good setup, and it starts to pay off. And then it just, like you said, then it stops. And then you're just frustrated at Kisneiver for some weird reason. But yeah, you start off with that whole Katsuhira, the Chidori arc there where, because of Katsuhira's history of being in the former Kizna system, he doesn't have the physical pain. And so he's basically, the way he described it, and I felt it was pretty relatable, was he says he's not interested in himself. And it's like, oh, well, there you go. So it literally took for, one of the school, I would say a school bully. He's just bullying the other bullies. He's necessary. It took him and like his childhood friend who, to be fair, he's not nearly like appreciative enough. Because like he mentions that he eats her food all the time. It's like, well then, my dude, you should at least like thank her or something. But I know it's because he's apathetic. So you have the whole situation where it's super cool because it shows where they start with the physical pain as basically like a shock collar. Like at first the Kizna system is nothing more than a shock collar to not lie, to like get them to reveal their secrets. So the fact that Hajime is the big bad bully, but he's scared of dogs, like, or the fact that Sugihito, because even though he's the pretty boy who's very flirtatious, who's almost pretty sexual in class, that he had a history of, he had a weight issue because his parents weren't around to like help him with his diet and stuff, or that Nico explaining that she's not really someone who believes in fairies. So they have to first breaks down all of their facades, it breaks down all of their personas, if you will, and then it just kind of gets you to at least be like, well, these are not the same characters that I'm usually used to in my animes.
Also, I have to add for the character design, Nico is literally just Nui Harame. So it's like, it's just, I saw her and I'm like, oh, hi, Nui Harame, what are you doing here? And then you look at Sugihito and it's just like, oh, that's the guy, that's like one of the Elite Four guys. And it's
Yeah,
like,
you
oh.
you start to see the relatable designs, the relatable, even like some of their personalities too. You can kind of see like, oh, I see where you may have liked some of the aspects of Supernatural Battle. And so you get them all connected, and you know you have I called it the Disco Hospital of Doom, which I don't know why the whole show doesn't just take place in it. They could have it would have been like a whole, I don't want to bring it up again, but a whole Danganronpa thing. Just lock them up and be like, all right, now y'all got to feel each other's pain while you survive the death hospital.
Yeah, you could literally make that a whole Saw movie, and it'd be legitimately great. Just a genuinely great idea for a horror/thriller movie like that.
And I don't know if they're like trying to do like a whole Maslow's hierarchical like reference here, but it's also kind of funny that like the different people attached are like each of them is bringing like because we're mentioning that the Kizna system is going from just physical pain all the way to like full mind meld, all the way to like sucking the life out of people. So when it starts at like, oh no, it's just a physical pain thing, I think it's super cool when they bring in Yoshiharu, because he's a physical masochist. So
Yoshiharu is the best. I love him.
They're all just exactly. He's beautiful. He's such a great character, and I love how like that's their first issue, is that they're like, oh no, we're attached to someone who craves physical pain, and that is our main punishment here. But you know, he becomes super cool in the group. He cancels an entire TV station, mind you, so he is a powerful character. But no, you kind of get introduced to everyone. You kind of get used to the concept that, oh hey, if one gets bonked in the head, they're all going to get bonked in the head. And then you have Katsuhiro and Chidori's drama that kind of levels up the Kizuna system because of how much basically it kind of it takes empathy literally. She mentions that she felt his pain even before the Kizuna system. So this is just it's pretty cool because it kind of lets you logically accept that the Kizuna system is doing more than, I mean, you could be one of those people where you just accept what Noriko says at face value, even though Noriko really doesn't know what she's talking about. She does, but she's also lying. So yeah, it really helps that she really did have that real emotional relationship with Katsuhiro, so that you can accept that all right, cool, we're gonna start having the characters feel like they kind of describe it as like a sad feeling or a doom feeling. So I don't know if they're like connecting just like emotional stress, or if it's actually specific emotions that were able to get like connected at first, because obviously it would have to be whatever would be more related to pain, because that's what the experiment was intentionally for, was to connect the physical pain. And it just kind of meant to be that humans experience a lot of different kinds of pain. It's not good to think that it's just one thing, but you kind of get that elevation, and you know the bullies get beat up, so the characters all bond, and it seems like they're actually falling into the hands of the Kizuna project. And then you kind of get to a moment where Honoka becomes the problem, basically the problem Kizuna are at that time, because now they don't have to really worry about physical pain. They're kind of getting used to that. But you know, Honoka's arc gets introduced, and it's basically like an ocean of just depression and disappointment and regret. And it's like, yeah, y'all picked the most emotionally unstable girl for your bonding project on purpose, didn't y'all? And she did.
And I have some things to say about Honoka's arc, because there are a couple things related to her relationship with her friend that kind of leads to this depression that, like, it kind of irks me in a way that I can't tell if the series was doing it on purpose or if this was kind of an accident. But it's like, they're just the way that that their relationship is portrayed just kind of gives me especially because I've seen it done better and actually addressed properly in another series.
We'll talk about it in this part. I'm just kidding. But no, that if nothing else, let it be known that here on this podcast, Kiznaiver and Little Witch Academia are full lesbian shows. Like, they definitely would have gone more if they could. And I know at this point it's just subtext or whatever, but no, them some lesbians in these shows, and salute them.
I would argue that, because the other thing you mentioned to me was that, Kiznaiver is pretty gay. So I was like, ooh, I was getting really excited for it. But then I went in and I'm like, the only really gay thing is that, that Honoka's friend clearly liked her, and she also had some kind of weird, like, complicated feelings toward her. So it's that thing of like, but like, other than that, and yeah, again, her friend is dead by the time the series starts. So it's like, I was kind of disappointed because it was like, I was expecting like, oh, like, again, we'll mention it a bit more once we get into like the actual relationship drama, but it's like, I was expecting like, oh, one of the dudes to be full gay, but that didn't happen. And I was like, no. But it's like, okay, so my thing, so the way the Honoka story goes is that her friend, who I am blanking on the name at the moment, Ruru. So basically the whole thing is that they were both they were both basically manga artists, and like, oh, they wrote together this manga with like the girl with the biggest eyes imaginable that I just cannot take
How
seriously.
to Draw Manga,
Yes.
Volume 2. But no, because the thing is, they're together one mangaka. Honoka, I guess, was better at the more of the story aspects.
Yeah, she was better at writing, and then Ruru was the artist.
Ruru was more about the character artist.
Yeah, Ruru basically, I forget what but she was basically she had a disease, and that she was basically going to she was going to die in like very soon.
The show just says a kidney disease.
Disease.
It's not specific on it, but no, it's the whole thing where they're both middle schoolers too, so they're very young artists. I do like how they even have a whole pen name. They go by Charles DeMacking. And their little book gets really popular with other middle school girls. Like, it's cool that the characters, some of the Kiznivers are familiar with at least some of the elements of the manga that Honoka made.
The big thing with me is that because the whole thing about it is that since Ruru died, she basically, since she believed that they died under bad terms, so like her whole thing is that, oh, she felt like that's why in like the second episode she ends by saying her secret is that she killed somebody, even though it turns out she didn't actually. She just has like the extreme guilt over her death
of someone who killed someone.
Yeah,
yeah.
But the thing with me is that I feel like the way it's portrayed in all of the flashbacks makes Ruru seem very, very emotionally manipulative. Like, you have that whole thing where she's like, where it looks like she's about to like commit suicide and fall off the thing, and Honoka has to like pull her off and like save her, and then she just kind of reacts to it by like laughing. And then there's like the scene when they're both in a room together, and like Ruru's like clearly trying to kind of like put the moves on her and like very imply that she wants to be like it's kind of this thing of like, oh, it's clearly she wants to be more, but they're both like, oh, she's gonna die soon, so we don't want to do that because it'll be more stress for us. But it gets to the point where like, oh, she like puts herself on her, and then when Honoka pushes her away, she just kind of laughs it off, being like, haha, you're so funny, I was just kidding. And it gets to the point where Honoka's like, I can't take this. It's like, this is just like the stress that you're putting me on is too much, and it's like, I can't deal with it anymore. And then again, Ruru kind of laughs off, being like, okay, I'll finish the book all on my own, and I'll write like this little message basically like taunting you and cursing you, which in the end it turns out that she didn't actually do that, and she wrote like a nice note in the book or whatever. But it's just kind of this thing of like, she is very clearly in the wrong here. Like, she is putting, like, no matter like what like her thing is like that she's dealing with, she's clearly putting Honoka through a lot of like really unneeded, like, you can tell that she is still like in this relationship, she is suffering like in her own way, even compared to the one is like dying. And it's like, just because she's the one who's gonna like, yeah, even though technically she's the one in the most pain, she's still putting her friend through this pain. And I feel like even the story, I can't tell, like, just because of the way it's executed, I can't tell if this is what the story was trying to do and kind of portrayed in a, oh yeah, this was a very like flawed like complex situation, and it's more about how does she deal with it now rather than what happened before. But it's also like they don't really like comment or clarify that, oh yeah, what Ruri did was wrong. They just kind of say it happened. And the reason why I mention this because it reminded me so much of I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, because that had a like pretty much exactly same kind of like moment where like the main girl who's dying of pancreatic cancer is like messing around with the boy that she's hanging around with, being like, oh, do you want to be in a relationship? Well, I don't want to be in a relationship because of my whole thing. Like, she's basically being all playful and flirty, but she's doing it as a joke. And this is like emotionally like this is like emotionally like hurting and like the boy, because he's like, I don't know what you want. It's like, this is like, it's hurt, like, this is like screwing me up just as much, because I'm like, it's like just feeling like that whole idea of like, oh, like trying to be true to your feelings, and it's like, oh, he doesn't know how to deal with it, and it gets to the point where he's like, he ends up exploding in his own way, and it gets to the point where it ends with her apologizing, being like, yeah, I went too far, I realized I went too far, and like they apologize and they make up, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, see, that's good. They recognize that what she was doing, even if it was for fun, it's like it was emotionally hurting him, and she realized,
it was bad.
She finally realizes that, oh yeah, like I shouldn't take this too far, and it's like, oh, then they both patch things up. So it's like, I saw an example right there in that story of, oh, that there, it isn't just the fact that, oh, because the person is being like flirty and playful, like it can do some damage to somebody. And as you see with Honoka, it does very much damage, because it's like, oh, she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life anymore. She's like, yeah, again, like it's very clearly like she's still trying to figure out her sexuality, because it's like, oh, she was attracted. She can't tell if she's attracted to her. Is she attracted to girls? Is she attracted to girls and guys? Because there's the whole thing of Sugihito, like, kind of like trying to like get with her and like basically trying to poke the bear. So it's very much that kind of case of, oh, like she's trying to slowly figure stuff out, and it's because of that relationship that she like got all screwed up. And it's like, I feel like I wish the story either made it more ambiguous, or very much like was able to clarify that, oh yeah, what she did was wrong, and part of the reason why she got screwed up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Just because there's
Rant
whole
over.
Scenes where, because there's whole scenes there where Honoka then repeats the cycle. There's that whole scene where she's on Sugihito, and she's just quoting her own book. So, like, no, it's exactly as you said, that there's damage there in her character. It was not a healthy relationship. Like, the relationship alone was damaging, and then the way it ended and then continued to hurt, because it's not like there was even any closure even after her death. Her Ruru's mother still felt that Honoka was responsible for her death. So there's just the amount of toxicity in there. And again, it kind of feels like this is where you get that transition where the show did start on its whole premise of physical pain. Like, they introduced a masochist for a reason, to be like, all right, this is a pain show. And then it starts to move on to like emotional issues. And then from there, kind of when we go into that last arc, that's when you start to get into like the damages of like bonding and like going to those full extremes. Because a lot of like Honoka's whole plot is, she was already pretty hesitant on like interacting with other people. With Ruru, she was already on like, that limited lifetimer. So, any connection with her is doomed to, end once she's like set to die. So, because throughout the show, Nico is actually like hounding Honoka because she wants to be friends. Like, she says like, from day one, she wanted to be friends just because they were in the same area, or just because they were Kisnivers. And then she keeps trying to give her reasons, like, well, we're also classmates. We share emotions now. Like, she keeps trying to get Honoka to, accept her and everyone as, I guess, officially under the title of friends. Like, she wants to be friends with friendship and everything. But, because of Honoka's past, because of her history of a toxic relationship ending tragically, like, she is not ready to extend that out, to trust other people, to even validate the idea that we are friends. Like, she's at most trying to have some associates around, but it becomes just this whole arc of, it's really sad because it basically is like the show sets her up with this awful backstory, and then has one of the characters know full well all about it and then use it as manipulation. I mean, you mentioned Ruru having, just that awful pattern of manipulation, and then Noriko goes and has her own rampage of manipulation, trying to get like a whole TV crew to interview Honoka about her whole past with writing and working with Ruru. And she makes it a mission. She makes it, like you said, makes a whole little song mission that go save her, go be superheroes, go have anime bonding time. And again, it kind of makes it feel like this is a show that's like taking the tropes of anime and being like, what if these were real? It's like, well, it would be really fucked up is what it would be. Like, a whole bunch of random people who shouldn't be friends, like sharing secrets to, be friends instantly. like that's not going to happen naturally and smoothly. Like it's just kind of funny where it's like the anime is trying to like force anime to occur with pain and through the stress. It's like, you will be best friends whether you want to or not. It's like, okay, show, just don't hurt the children anymore.
Yeah, that was something you mentioned to me where it's like, it very much feels like, it kind of feels in a weird, like, meta-textual way, is that it's a series about anime itself. It's like, oh, these people are free. It's kind of like, in, like, I guess, a Cabin in the Woods is kind of a funny thing of like, oh,
yes, they're forced to play the roles.
Yeah, is forcing them to be in, like, yeah, these cliched anime roles and kind of forcing them into positions that, like, yeah, like them to make them friends just like they would in any other anime. And then you get to that point where there's like the whole episode where they're like, now we're gonna split them off and ship them and putting them into a forced love triangle to see where the drama comes in. It's like, oh yeah, like I think if anything, like if this series was like, because again, I think it's a bit too muddled to fully say this, but it's like, I think if you were to say that, oh, this is like a series that's a meta-textual way on how we view anime and how anime is produced, and like when you really look back how these creations and characters in anime are put together, it's kind of screwed up and kind of in like funny. Like I think you definitely could read that. I think it's like if they leaned into that a bit more, then I could definitely say it was. But like on its own, I can definitely see like, oh yeah, the pieces are really there.
Yeah, no, it was definitely where, again, we're at the end of the Honoka arc where the show is really focusing on just mental distress and like the negative aspects of it. It's not hiding that, if you're going to want to know all about a person, you need to be fully prepared that person has experienced pain, suffering, all things. Like my biggest takeaway from when we watched Supernatural Battle was when that character says there is not a person in the world without care or worry. And so I feel like Kiznaiver kind of really takes that, where it's like, there is nobody. Even the pretty boy has had to have had issues. We've all had issues in our past. So I feel like I really like that it's an anime that's like trying to rip that out and like show that. That's like, if you want these like fun lovey-dovey friendships, like you got to be prepared for people who have been through pain, and you need to be willing to at least empathize with that pain, or there's, like Noriko thinks, there's going to be no other way that you can bond with them.
It's also a thing of like, oh, just because you are friends, just because you are best friends even, doesn't mean you need to share every single thing about, like, people it's not just about having secrets, but it's people need to have things about themselves. It's like things that they can share with just themselves. It's like they can't even in like the most healthiest of relationships are ones where you can trust in the other, and like you each have your own thing, and you can be glad in knowing, oh, they're doing their own thing, and that's fine. But it's like when you're forcing everybody to know everything about each other, no matter who you are or what it is, then it gets screwed up, because it's like, oh, there will be complications, there will be conflictions, and it's like no two people are going to be completely in sync, and when you're not completely in sync, being forced to, that's going to blow up in your face.
It's going to bring even more pain around. Yeah, because so like around this part of the show, there was another show. I think it was like on Netflix or something. It was called Sense8. So they basically had this.
The Sense8 by the Wachowskis.
Oh, is that okay? So that
yeah. I haven't seen the rest. I've seen the first couple episodes, but I haven't seen like the whole thing. But yeah, it is very Wachowskis. I'll just say that.
Yeah, well, just because it very much Kiznaiver and that show really, I think about them in combination a lot, just because I know that Sense8 has like a whole like plotline where like they physically feel each other's sensations. Like if one person in the collective is like having intercourse, like they are all feeling that. So I thought, I mean, I know we weren't going to go like to that, but I thought we were getting to this point where it was going to start like interfering with their daily lives, like not just in the whole like, oh hey, someone got smacked, but like these weren't my emotions at the time, like what was going on. And so that's kind of like you said, it's where the part where the show starts to really, it set up its themes, it started to escalate its themes, and you're like, okay, this is a trigger show. Like, the show about the fashion high school ends up with a giant space battle. Like, we can, the universe is infinite in where this show could go. So I was at that point when, the physical sensations started bleeding over, when they were started to like accept each other, through the human flaws. But then like kind of like I said, then becomes the part of the anime where we have to have the love triangles, and then everything starts getting really complicated with the show. Because I mean, Chidori loves Katsuhira, but Katsuhira loves Noriko, but Hajime loves Chidori, but Nico loves Hajime. And yes, if that was very confusing, welcome to the second half of Kiznaiver.
This is also where I need to bring up like the other thing that kind of like annoyed me about the series is that I just can't buy Katsuhira and Noriko as a thing, just because I feel like Noriko is so, I mean, like, yeah, she's out there, she's just she's emotionless, she's putting everybody through all of this shit, and it's like the only thing, it's like, because this is another example that I'm gonna bring up that actually made me appreciate this series a lot better, is Darling in the Franxx.
True. Because again, yeah, no, there's a lot of Darling vibes in Kiznaiver if you start with Darlings first, because you get a lot, or as reality would put it, Kiznaiver inspired a lot of stuff in Darlings, and when we get to that, I'll mention that like Darlings honestly set me up for disappointment when I ended up watching Darling. So no, you are very spot on that there are lots of vibes.
And the thing is that I actually think, because I mean, I liked how it was in Franxx, but after watching this, I actually appreciated how the love triangle was portrayed much more, because it's like in this series, again, you have the dense kind of emotionless main character, you have the mystery girl who comes out of nowhere, who's revealed to have a connection to the main character in the past, and then you have the childhood friend who's doing everything she can to try to get the main character to notice her, but just cannot, no matter what she does. And there's the thing
and
of like,
is in pain.
Yeah, and it's the thing where it's like, in Franxx, I actually buy Hiro and Zero Two as a relationship before that reveal happens, because Zero Two is much more proactive. She's much more attractive. It's like you can see how Hiro would be like fascinated by her and want to be with her more and fall for her even before the reveal that happens like midway through the season. With here, other than their connection in their past, which he only has vague recollections of through dreams, there's nothing that Noriko does that would make emotionless Katsuhira fall for her. And it's like that's just the thing that kind of really bugged me, where I'm like it's not even like, and it's not even they are like, oh, I think he should be with Chidori, because I feel like, oh, then it's very, yeah, because it's very much that thing of like, yeah, Chidori is that childhood friend trope of like, she tries, but it's also she's trying too hard, and it's a thing of like, if Katsuhira doesn't, like, there is definitely the thing of like, oh, he needs to be more appreciative of her, of like, oh yeah, he just kept taking her lunches without thinking about it, and it's like, oh, he needs to learn that, oh, he needs to be appreciative of her and need to actually recognize what she's doing. But it's also a thing of like, oh, that doesn't mean he has to accept her. He can turn her down. But it's like, exactly. but in that retrospect, see, what I think it should have been Yoshiharu, because Yoshiharu,
either or.
No. Well, Sugihito and Honoka, I think, make the most sense, because that's definitely played up, and they have that kind of opposites attract thing. I think that's fine. But Yoshi, because I mean, like, their first appearance in that third episode has that very meet cute eyes of like, oh, he's such like Katsuhira. He sees some, like, the way the camera and like the way the series like portrays it's like, oh, there's definitely that kind of meet cute moment of like, oh, he sees something interesting about him and he sees something about him, and it's definitely, I mean, like, by that final third of the series where everybody has abandoned each other and abandoned Katsuhira, like, Hajime started off as like the guy who's very close to him, and I thought he's gonna be the one who ends up with Katsuhira, because they have that close thing, but he eventually ends up kind of going a bit toxic and driving away from them because of his feelings for Chidori. But then Yoshiharu is the one who stays with him, and he's like the one kind of helping him. He's like helping him like cook and like making food. He's being there. He's being his emotional support while Noriko is gaslighting him, and I'm like, he should be with him. It's like he is the one who like he even more so than like other than their past. He's the one who really much demonstrates he knows how how Katsuhira feels. He's showing that he has a very he's weird and out there, but he shows that, oh, he cares and he knows when to take things seriously when it has to. And it's like he gives that advice that he has that both that physical and emotional support that Katsuhira needed at that time. And it's very much a thing of like more than anybody else. And it's like, oh, that's the relationship. Again, Noriko just keeps making things worse, and they have to get out of their way to kind of tell her to stop, and he has to put himself in harm's way to get her to stop. And in the end, it's just, oh, that's why they're together. And it's like, again, other than and they wanted to try to say that, oh, it was more than just their relationship in the past. It's like, oh, they had a bond together now, and it's like, I just didn't. There wasn't a good bond. But yeah, because Noriko, again, if there was more of like the biggest part that I actually really liked was when because Honoka had her thing of like the people where they gave her the mission of save Honoka, and then they go and drive away the reporters, and it's like, oh, the mission was complete, and she goes to see, and Katsuhira goes to see her, and it's like, oh, why'd you end the mission there? It's like, because you saved Honoka. And he's like, did we actually save her? I mean, like, it feels kind of like he basically calls her out for like, oh, like we didn't actually save her, we physically saved her, we didn't emotionally save her.
Well, it ties into just like how fucked up Noriko and all her missions are, because she's gamifying their full emotions. Like, you don't save people, like, and especially not like when it's just make this person less stressed out than they currently are. That's not saving them.
Yeah, and then when he when she responds, how do you feel? And he's basically like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. And then and you see that hit her.
It's
and
so
like the
hard,
next couple
dude.
episodes, and I'm like, yes, man. It's like tell her what. If you aren't gonna do anything later, no one else is gonna say, like at least say something to her. And it's like, oh, that's like the most ramification she ever really gets. It's just him pulling a mom on her.
Yeah, no, because I agree that Katsuhiro and Yoshiharu, like, they have full chemistry. Even, like, I didn't notice that, but yeah, they do the whole, like, lover's eyes meeting on his introduction, but they also have great, like, comedic chemistry just throughout the whole show. Like, there's the whole scene where they're cutting wood and he keeps trying to put him in, like, dangerous situations. All the way to the point that, yeah, he becomes his emotional support person at the time, and he does soft dripping noises to help him think. It's like, that's full romance. Like, that's not kissing, but that is, I don't know how human connection gets any deeper than that.
Yeah, and then because that basically builds up into the ending where it's basically Noriko decides, fuck it, I'm gonna take over the entire town.
The whole world / just the town.
And then so that final episode is like the big climax is like them attempting to kidnap everybody so that they can put everybody on the Kizuna system, because she's still stuck in that kind of delusion of, oh, if everyone's in the Kizuna system and I take all of their pain, then everyone will be connected and everyone will be happy. And then you have the whole thing where like she's like up on the bridge and they have their big yelling to each other, and it's like, no, you don't need to do that. Stop. No, it's fine. It's okay. It's all right. And then
stop. The power of friendship will save all of us, or put us all in deep, dire pain. We've kind of experienced the full spectrum there.
Yeah, and then it concludes with, oh, he saves her after she falls, and she's like, oh, I guess I guess I don't believe in that anymore. And then it's like, oh, and everything is and then skip forward a little bit, and everything's hunky dory, everything's turned out fine, and it's like, it felt too rushed. It's like we needed Noriko to be good again. We needed Naruto to be good and end up with Katsuhira, so we kind of orchestrated this situation for it to happen, even though it feels like this was definitely, if it was going to be like this, it needed like a greater time jump of just to establish these characters kind of got over a lot of their shit and have started to move on now, rather than just being like, oh, this is like a week later and now they're all like hunky-dory.
They got themselves pretty like deep in the drama and the pain on each other. Like the whole love quadrihedral there, like that was, like I said, it's one of the darker scenes of the show. It's one of my favorite scenes of the show. I think it's really good. It was where I thought like, all right, the show, like, here's the next step, here we go in. But that's also where it's super weird. It's because the Kiznivers are only meant to be connected for the summer. So there's a limited time that they were even going to be connected at all. And so you get to this basically this acceleration to this moment where, you know, you've got 7 people writhing on the floor because they just can't handle each other's emotions. You know, that's where I'm thinking we're all right, here's where we're going to get to, where they're either just going to all end up like in hospital beds, like not able to move because they're all like in pain, or they're all going to have some weird creepy scene where all 7 of them are like talking in the same voice at the same time because they've all melded way too far together that they basically become like the Stepford Cuckoos or something. But no, the show then switches over more to, you know, the previous Kiznaiver project, you know, more about Noriko's backstory. It's meant to be her whole revelation that, like, oh, here's her motivation. You had described it that it was very much like a trigger trope of the angry asshole who's actually doing everything for a good reason, except Noriko doesn't really fit the trope either because she doesn't really have the good reason to go along with it. She's just the asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Noriko is like, it's in the same vein as Satsuki, Nova, her, Diana.
Yeah, they're this character that they're set up one way because when you watch the show again, you're gonna look at them completely different.
02, Rika, the Burnish guy in Promare. And when am I blanking? I don't know who the person is in BNA, but yeah, every Trigger series has that role. It isn't always exact, but it is definitely that role of the kind of asshole / rival that kind of like has more under the surface, but like on first viewing, they're kind of like more. I mean, some are more likable than others, but it's like, yeah, there's definitely that same like that same thread between all those characters. And Katsuhiro follows in it follows in the trope of the female trigger main characters are all really annoying and loud, and all of the male trigger characters are dense, stupid idiots.
Not all of them, just all of them. Yeah. So, you know, it's meant to be her whole revelation moment. You get Katsuhiro's backstory, even though really, even him being like a former Kiznaiver member, like it really just ties into, again, shipping him to Noriko, which is kind of sad. Like he really could have just had this dude who just really wasn't feeling emotions. I mean, it happens biologically. That happens all the time. Like you have the whole masochist who's probably more sensitive or whatever. It's why you should ship them together. But then the whole plot, the whole show, it's almost like just takes a whole hard steer to be like, we gotta redeem Noriko. Like this is priority. This has to be the main theme. So, you know, you get all the history of like her history with the 2 teachers who, again, also give like Darling's like parent vibes as well too, and then the whole crew of kids being experimented on. And then you have the backfire of the original experiment where Noriko, rather than taking 1/35th, was taking 35/1. She was taking everyone else's pain to like leave them all with less. And so then you get introduced to the other kids that are all shells, and like that there it gets kind of close to like you said, to like the full dark aspects of what they've been implying, what they've been showing the potentials of the Kizna system are. And they just more set it up as like, all right, here's who we're gonna save today. It's like, all right, we're gonna save them. And then, yeah, just super quick, episode after episode, you have the Goromans just deciding to be evil. You have the dark ones, for some reason, that just start kidnapping people by the truckloads. Like, their plan is outrageous. For a company that had no funding, the fact that they're going to kidnap the entire city is impressive. Like, it's literally that tweet where it's like surgery, $80, 7 gurney beds, $70, massive army of dark mascots.
Massive army of mascots, $2,500. Please help me budget.
Please help our research institute. We don't understand what's going on. Like, that's Noriko's true problem. She's fiscally irresponsible.
And mentioning Franks again, because another thing that I think Franks does really well in comparison to Kiznaiver is like, I like how Franks does like how it portrays the developing relationship between like that cast of characters. It's like, oh, they're all put in this kind of kind of positioned by these higher ups that are kind of manipulating them for their own gain. But you can see how these characters, they slowly develop like their relationship with each other. They have like they have their own kind of like personal feelings, and like they have those kind of like those love triangles that develop between all the characters, whether that be in like both in straight and gay ways. So it's like there is much more. While again, Keys and Ivor is very much they're very aware that we're being forced to be this way, so it's hard to tell how much of this is genuine and how much of this is just reaction to the events we're being put in. So it's like it is very much it's hard to completely compare, but I do think that it, like when I see them back to back and when I'm thinking of Franks, I'm like, oh, I really like how they portrayed those characters, and I do like these characters, and I like how their relationships turn out. But it's also very much that thing of like, oh, they're trapped under this kind of lens of the manipulation, and it's like even the story's kind of like they're aware of it, because they're like, oh yeah, they keep mentioning like, oh, we would never be together if it wasn't for that, and they're like, yeah, but we are together now, so it's like that must account for something. And it's like that is like still a fair point of like, oh, just because of how you're put together, like in the end, once that relationship is developed, then you can decide, do I like it or do I not? And it's like by that point, that's all up to you. Then it's like by the end, they're the ones given the decision of, oh, I do like you, so I want to be around you.
And I guess it could also be like a whole, statement on just that emotional pain between people, like that drama, that toxicity, because I keep calling it that, but it's more reflecting like that they're experiencing pain due to like the toxicity between the relationship or whatever. And it could be them trying to like make a statement on it when like it gets to the end and like it's skipped and everyone is trying to like work together to be friends. That's like, it kind of could show that like even that pain is pain that can like, you can walk past it. Like even though like this shouldn't be something that they can recover from, they're trying to. I know with the whole weird love triangle there, Nico finishes her whole character arc where she's like, I'm just gonna keep the drama to a minimum, but as soon as I have my move to, get my man and beat my love rival, I'm taking it. So it's like, okay, it's interesting. Like, it's good that the show it also doesn't end like on those fake like clean cut black and white like, and then everyone got along and then everyone got their sweetheart and there was no complications with any of these relations ever again. It's like, no, human relationships are pretty complicated. They're bumpy and they're messy and they take work to like keep health in a healthy manner. So
what kind of, because it does end with the whole thing of like, oh, Noriko and Katsuhiro are now in a relationship, I guess, and they're all doing their kind of like goof where Chidori is like doing her whole thing of like, oh, she's being all flustered and such, and then you have the whole thing of like Nico being like, oh, well, let's all go hang out at the mall again sometime, and then they ask Noriko, and then it ends with like Noriko like it does the whole thing of like the Kudere character finally smiling, and it gets to that point where I'm like, holy fuck, that's Violet Evergarden. Because I was like, it was bugging me so much what Noriko looked like, and then when she has that moment when she smiles, I'm like, she's a fucking Kyoto Annie character. It's like, that's like, her design was just so like different, and it was like, it bugged me because I was trying to figure out where have I seen that face before, and then she smiled and I'm like, oh yeah, that was Violet Evergarden, because that did the exact same thing, and I was like, okay. But yeah, then that was just a me thing. That was just a me mind blow like eureka moment.
It's like, I didn't recognize you without your smile there. But I mean, I didn't recognize Luluko at the end of the show either.
Oh yes, that's right.
It was when someone like pointed it out. I was like, oh, like I had to go back and watch the episode like the fourth time to be like, oh shit, there's our homegirl. She's right there.
Yeah, well, Luluko and Nova, like, they appear like, yeah, in the background in the scene with Chidori and Hajime in the mall in the final episode. Like they're like in the background, so it's like you have to like really be looking for them. And so I'm gonna assume because since Nova's there, I'm gonna assume this is during like that like third chunk of the series where they're traveling to all the trigger worlds. And this is like, I'm gonna assume that they were there when all of the mascots were doing their uprising, and they're like, what the hell's going on? And then it's like, oh, now everything's fine, okay. And then this is like right before they left. That is my headcanon, because it's like, oh, it isn't just a cameo, they established the Triggerverse exists, so yeah, I'm just gonna assume like that is real. Yep.
Everything is canon. everything is canon. I mean, if it doesn't take place during those episodes, then I could see it as in them continuing their space cop missions with Space Patrol Trigger, I suppose would be the more apt thing if it takes place after this series.
So since we got through the ending, I'm probably going to spend the next, 10 to 15 minutes, because I've had in my head for, like, ever since I finished the series of my own how it should have ended for Kiesniver, of just, like, if this had, like, 5 to, like, maybe 6 or 7 episodes added, if they did this, I think it would be maybe not like super like groundbreaking or anything, but I think taking the ideas that the series had started with, I think this would be a really fun and kind of like, I think would pay off everything a much more interesting. At least you could see this a lot very fanficky in some ways, but I'm like, it just feels like it would have been better to me. So you have the whole thing of like Noriko is on the thing. They're all calling out to her, but instead of doing the whole thing of she jumps and she gets saved, she comes down and she leaves, and she goes back to the science lab, and all the characters are like, we don't know what she's doing, and we're kind of nervous and scared, and we don't know like what she wants. She gets back to the science lab, she's unsure of what she wants, and before she can decide what she wants, a chemistry teacher suddenly shows up and knocks her out and takes her away, and he's like, we've gone too far to do this, so I'm going all the way, presses the button, and the kidnapping spree occurs. And then the counselor teacher, realizing what's going on, she takes the 7 main kids, they go into hiding. You jump forward maybe a week later, and now pretty much the entire town's been Kiesniver. They've all been Kiesnived. So they're all they all been Kiesnived. So the entire city is like, it's kind of like the Kill la Kill, like where it's like, oh, you have that whole like flash forward after the
clothes take like, over the world.
Yeah, so you have like only it's much more of like a. It's kind of like a weird kind of like, because everybody's there and like, oh, everybody is in the town, but there's this weird sense of unease because everyone's aware that, oh, if somebody gets hurt, if somebody in this town gets hurt, we're gonna feel it. So everybody's being very cautious. They're being very nervous. They're being aware of like not to do anything dangerous and like staying away from each other. So it's like, it's very much that kind of like weird. It's dystopia without it being like full on apocalyptic of just, oh, everybody. It's showing in effect what this world connected by the Kiesnivers would do. Is like everybody would be connected, but no one would be connected like in any meaningful way. It's just, they're all basically like, yeah, zombies just living their lives, trying not to hurt each other because they're scared what will happen to them. It's like, oh, if we get found out that we got hurt and everybody else got hurt, in return, they're gonna like do something like we're gonna be called out, we're gonna become pariahs in some way. So it's like you have that whole play, and while the main characters are all hiding away, they're all sad because they're like, oh, they think Noriko betrayed them, like, again. Katsuhira is like completely depressed now because he's like, oh, I started getting my feelings back, and now all I feel is sadness. And it's like you have again, like, the characters are trying to like to be their emotional support to each other now that they're the only ones that aren't connected. And you have like in my version, you can have Chidori kind of like coming to terms with, okay, he doesn't have feelings for me, but I'm going to try to like be more of a friend to him. Yoshiharu is again that like a closer emotional support to him. Hajime is like he kind of like gets off of his bullshit and like kind of figures out like, okay, I need to be more like accepting and open towards this. And then at the same time you have Noriko kind of locked up. She's like she's connected to the system itself, like taking in some more of the pain as well. And you have basically this moment of her lying down, like basically lying down, being forced to be with her thoughts and trying to resulting in her figuring out, what do you want? What is it that you're feeling? Like, why do you want your feelings? And it gets to the point where basically you can consider this cliche or whatever, but it's like her emotions start to reappear, and like the connection, because they establish that, oh, she has the previous connection with the previous Kiesniver, with the previous Kiesniver in Katsuhira. So that restarts up, and so Katsuhira starts to feel her emotions as well, and it gets to a point where it's like it like the spark connects to the Kiesniver that's connected to the other 7. So at that moment, all 8 of them, all 7 of them are feeling Noriko's pain, and they start to feel her, like they start to feel like her thinking about the past, thinking about what she wants now, and you get that moment where she's sitting there, she's starting to cry, and she's just like, I want someone to help me. And it's like that moment when they realize, okay, now we know what Noriko wants, now we know what she's feeling, now we know who she is now, let's save her. So it's like that moment that you mentioned One Piece, One Piece, and it's like
then it turns to Eni's lobby.
Yeah, the character when that character just kind of breaks down and they kind of realize where they're just like, yeah, they basically get over themselves and kind of realize, okay, no, this is what I want. Like, feeling things is okay, feeling sad is all right, and like asking for help, be like, somebody save me from my pain, and they're like, oh, just in that moment, they're like, okay. Like, I feel like that moment, having a moment like that would probably, like, be the best way to redeem Noriko in this kind of story, because it's kind of like what made Satsuki, I think, kind of work, her kind of turnaround work in Kill la Kill, was that she had her lowest moment. She had her moment of failure, and her kind of terrible decisions, like, actually backfire on her. So to have Noriko's, like, kind of decisions backfire her, and have her, like, be able to reflect and kind of realize, okay, no, this is what I want. This is what I think we should, like, this is what, like, yeah, not even like what they should do, but just what she wants. And I feel like that moment, and having the characters feel that moment, like having that Kizuna system actually create something positive and a positive change in their relationship, I think would be like kind of the best roundabout way to pay that all off and to give them a reason to want to care about Noriko. So then you have, like, then the climax could be, like, a thing of, like, oh, they need to break into the hospital to try, and because they're like, oh, we can't just fight our way through, because if we fight, everybody in the town's going to get hurt, so they got to have, like, they got to be very stealthy about it, and they got to, like, kind of figure out a way, so it's not, they can't just go guns a-blazing, so you have that, you can, that's your way of having, like, a more, like, creative climax. They go in, they save her, and then it's like, oh, we got to deal with they got to deal with the chemistry teacher, and you can kind of like play this off, like, I can see it going either way, of either he didn't install the Kizuna system in him because he's a coward, so they proceed to beat the shit out of him that way, or you can have it being like, oh, that he does have the Kizuna system in him, so they can't physically assault him, so they instead do what he did to them, is do a lot of psychological manipulation of, like, locking him in rooms, kind of trapping him, having him forced to kind of deal with his own demons, and kind of realizing, oh, why are you doing this, how, and basically ending with him becoming the crying mess in the end, kind of trapped in his own feelings. And it's like, oh, that's how everything comes in. They shut down the Kizuna system, and it's like they have proof of, like, oh, yep, connections are best created when you have some control over it. And it's like, oh, see, they have, like, you see the effects of what happens when this Kizuna system is distributed all across, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't work. And it's like, oh, people become more paranoid and lifeless, and by giving them the freedom to choose how to create their connections, it makes those connections much more meaningful. And I think what would be the perfect the perfect end to it is to have, like, because we did the episode at the beginning, when the episode in the middle, when they're shipping everybody and trying to say, like, oh, this person should be with this person should be with this, instead have it flipped on its head, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, Honoka and Sugihito get together because, oh yeah, they have, like, their chemistry makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, it makes sense why they would get together. You could have Nico get together with Hajime, and it's like, oh, like, I mean, like, that's unexpected, because it's like, oh, you were assuming Hajime and Chidori would be together, but it's like, oh no, Hajime and Nico end up, like, spending more time together, and it's like, oh, then they decide to try out their relationship. And then you have Katsuhira getting together with Yoshiharu, because I feel like in this ending you could have Katsuhira getting together with Noriko, because again, like, I feel like that decision humanizes Noriko a lot more, and I think that humanization would make Katsuhira liking her much more believable. Yeah. But I think it would be much more interesting in this story to have him go with Yoshiharu, because he decides that what their relationship in the past was in the past, and now they're different people. It's like, we can still be close, we can still be friends, but he's developed such a intricate, like, relationship with Yoshiharu that he's just like, I just like him. I just like being with him. I feel like
it could chill Chidori down, like, a good couple steps, because then she could just be like, oh, that's why he would never, like, acknowledge me all the time. Wrong gender. And at least that would, like, it would at least like calm her down a little bit so that she's not like left completely out hanging with no reciprocation of any emotions there too. So that's pretty good too.
And then in the biggest twist, you can have Chidori and Noriko get together
Hey!
because it's like and this all doesn't happen immediately after the end. This is like several months later, so it's like you can kind of have this idea of, oh, maybe Chet, now that a humanized Noriko can maybe become like closer with everybody and closer with Chidori, because Chidori would be more open and being like, oh, we were both effectively dumped by him, so it's like let's spend more time together and realize, oh, we actually like to get each other, and then they get together, and it's like, oh, I think that would be I kind of imagine it being like the scene of like, oh, the counselor is talking with the chemistry teacher in like prison or whatever, and he's just like, oh, just tell me what the results, like he's still obsessed with the results, and then he explains this is all of their relationships, and he's just so confused. He's like, what happened? It's like, it's their choice. And it's like, I think that would be like just having, by having that whole, the theme of connection and pain being like, it's all about choice. And it's like, if they choose to hurt each other, they choose to accept this pain, they choose to accept others' pain. And I think like that would probably be like the perfect way of like combining all of the themes together. Like maybe you can see it at like that would be like the much more optimistic and much more, I guess, quote unquote, mainstream ending overall, where it's like, I could definitely see this going in a much darker direction. Like, I could definitely see like them taking the ending and like doing it much more, showing much more of the ramifications of like the pain and like what would happen. But in terms of like just extending the story a bit, and again, just giving them more time and doing those slight differences, doing those slight changes, I think could, at least in my personal opinion, would just bring the story all together more and make these characters' relationships and their journey, just make it just a bit more satisfying. Just to have them have that climax and have that kind of moment of realization against someone who is truly on the other side versus Noriko, who just in the main series is kind of like the conflicted, who's a kind of like it's weird because she takes the role of the conflicted person and also the person taking charge, where it's like if you had the person taking charge, if you had like one main antagonist of the one who is taking charge and who's just kind of like full stop, I think having them face off against a character like that would just be that last piece of the puzzle. That would just be because again, the chemistry teacher is such a dick, and I'm like, I was expecting him to be the secret final boss by the end, so the fact that he wasn't was just kind of a weird thing for me.
There is no final boss. The final boss is, I mean, maybe Noriko, but technically it's human connections and everything. Yeah. But no, I like just kind of, I mean, yeah, fanficky, but it, like you said, it hits on the themes that are brought up in the show, because the show itself definitely feels like that climax just stops, just kind of comes to an end, and then all of a sudden we're in the future, and it's the relationships have moved on. It's like, wait, what? And the credits are rolling over this whole scene as well too, so that's where it's like, damn it, I wanted more. What happened there? So no, if Trigger ever does redo some Kiznaiver, I hope they take you, Stefan, to heart, because I think you have a good idea for tying up the ending there. I really like that. Just because otherwise you're just sort of left now with a show that has an amazing OP, some pretty great characters, some spooky twists and some spooky themes, and then just kind of stops, and then everyone just goes about their day. And it's, I don't know, it kind of leaves me a little empty. I mentioned it earlier, it kind of makes me feel a little hungry, just wanting a little more of the world to try and get some conclusion, some sort of message there. But no, the way the show is now is still a very good, pretty interesting show if you want to get into like, because the thing too is that this is also sort of its own weird like genre type. Like, this is not a slice of life, this is not action per se. So to me, I think this is like, it's kind of like it's taking slice of life and then cranking it up with the trigger violence. It's like, all right, let's have all the drama and punching.
Yeah, I was about to say, I would say it's a sci-fi drama is how I would describe it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's very accurate.
Oh, and very quickly, something I want to mention about regarding the dub for Kiznaiver is that it's a very weird thing, just not so much in terms of per performance, because I think the performances are all done pretty well. It's more so the fact that the cast itself is like, I mean, usually with like you have like the staples, like, yo, you got like the Funimation crew, and like you got like those people. It's like, oh, you know, those guys are all. You have like Sentai has their own like crew of like actors and stables. Like, this was a weird thing where it's like pretty much none of the actors I like recognized by name or by voice. I think there was like, I think one of them I thought was somebody, but then I looked and it's like, oh nope, that isn't them at all. And it was like, it was a weird thing of like, oh, looking into it, it's like, it turns out, oh, pretty much all of these actors are Canadian. And like that was something weird to find out. It's like, oh, it's a Canadian, like it's a group of Canadian actors that like normally like that dub projects that are like dubbed in Canada. It's like I couldn't really find I was trying to look at like trying to track down what the studio was and like who was like responsible for like directing and all that stuff, but I couldn't really find a lot of information. But it's like I didn't like, oh yeah, pretty much all these actors kind of like appeared in like the same type of like roles that were dubbed in Canada, and
That's
it very much
amazing. That's amazing because especially like with this show, the fact that, if you look at it as a metatextual, like these are characters being forced to play like the stereotypical anime tropes, and like, yeah, we've all seen a dub where like it's the same, like you see voices reused because the character is basically the same trope again. So that's super interesting that in this show of deconstructing the tropes, like none of the characters have any of the trope voices because you don't recognize any of the voice actors.
And I wonder if that, because again, what we said, like this was co-produced by Aniplex and Crunchyroll, and the fact that these are mostly like the group, the stable of actors that like I think like I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure all the ones I looked into, they haven't like made anything noteworthy since Kiesniver, which is also like another like weird. So it makes me feel like it feels like Crunchyroll probably like they looked up like they were doing like they basically outsourcing the dub to like these people because it's like, oh, they were able to find them either whether it's cheaper or like because they didn't have like a stable of actors set up yet in comparison to Funimation and Aniplex and all that stuff. And the one voice I did recognize by looking up to that did somebody that I recognized was Hajime's voice is Zero from a bunch of the Mega Man X games. So I was like, oh, okay, that's something I recognize. So like that was something funny to think of Hajime as Zero.
And they both got pretty outrageous hair.
And I think this is really interesting. I literally just found this out like right now just by looking it up. Is that the writer? Because again, we mentioned the director didn't really do much, but the writer is Mari Okada, who's like a very like kind of like open like writer in Japan. Like she's written for so many different projects, and like the two that stuck out to me the most was Toradora and Pet Girl of Sakuroso.
Oh,
Pet Girl of Sakuroso especially is like, that is a series that like honestly, this could be weird to say, but just like honestly check out that series because it starts off on the surface like a very generic slice of life, like kind of like weird romantic comedy series, but like several episodes through it gets into be like this very deep, like not fully dark, but like real series about imposter syndrome and depression and about like living with someone on the spectrum. And it's just like, it goes in so many like out there places that just kind of blew my mind. And it does all of those topics, like it takes all those topics like very seriously while throwing in a lot of comedy. And they like go like real, they do as much as you like possibly can within that time limit. It's like I feel like those are both like, yeah, they're both like light novel adaptations. So there very much is like precedent in like the adaptation. But I feel like, yeah, again, in Toradora, which is also a slice of life romantic comedy that gets into more kind of like stories about like the human nature and like very reflective on how do we feel and like what do these feelings mean. And it's like I feel like those are two examples of like series that I enjoy that I think that portray those kind of like connections very well. Yeah. And it's like I can see like a lot of that, especially since Kiesniver is like it's a full original like project, so I can definitely see a lot of that like kind of when I know that, I see a lot of her fingerprints in it. And I can kind of tell, like, oh yeah, I can see like what they're going for, and I do like respect like the idea. I do like a lot of the ideas, and I respect like what they're going for. I just feel like, oh, it could have been like they could have just gone a bit further and done a bit more with it, and I think it would have turned out overall really well.
Yeah, she did Anohana as well, so that's another just group of friends that all have issues with each other, and they are more than willing to hurt each other to not work them out until the power of friendship like compels them.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's like, honestly, even though probably if I were to look at it objectively, this series is better than Supernatural Battles and Ninja Slayer, but honestly, in my opinion, I'd probably rank it below both of those, just because this is, I mean, mostly because, yeah, both Supernatural Battles and Ninja Slayer are so much more lighthearted that they're easier to go back. They're easier for me to want to go back to. While Kiznaiver, again, it's so heavy in its themes and its topics, and it's like how like depressing it can get at some points, that it's like, it's a hard series to want to just go back and casually watch. So it's like, I'd be harder to go back to in comparison to those two, and it's like, even then, it's like, I feel like since it doesn't completely stick the landing with those heavy topics, it makes me, I wish I could have liked it more. Yes. But it's like, I do.
Yes, no, I agree. But luckily, in contrast to the series itself being a bit difficult to go back and rewatch, the OP, again, is still the easiest thing to just go back and re-listen to at any time.
Which I have, yeah.
Several times. It's the whole reason I cried during Ninja Slayer. Whole reason. But yeah. I would rank this still pretty high. I still thoroughly enjoy Kiznaiver. I would probably rank it about the same as where stuff like Supernatural Battle was. I wish I could put it on the same tier as, you know, stuff like Kill la Kill, stuff like Gridman, stuff that's like on like the... I wish Kiznaiver had saved anime. I really wish it had, but this was one of the times that Trigger did not save anime, and that's okay. They don't need to be saving anime every single time. They do it sometimes, and that's more than enough. So, but it's definitely something that I like to. It's definitely something I think about. It's something I usually recommend if people are, you know. It's something I definitely recommend all the time. If nothing else, to let them know it's like, yes, you need to watch it because it's pretty gay. But no, just to get people to watch weird new things about people hurting each other, I guess.
I would like to see Trigger try this, because I don't think they've done this. As far, because I'm trying to think. Yeah, out of everything else that's coming up in the future, they haven't done any. Again, Frank's is probably the closest, but Frank's is also very bombastic in its action. So it's like it's kind of like a half. I would be really interested in seeing like them do another series like this, of like something that isn't action focused or comedy focused. That's one that's just very much like, yeah, this character drama that focuses on like very heavy themes. Like, I'd very much like to see them try something like that again.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even if you don't think Kiznaiver is the best, like, I think all of us all agree that it's something that like should be looked at again, and definitely deserves another round of, you know, content and material, because it doesn't have to be Kiznaiver 2. We don't want that, but, you know, like you said, something that focuses more on character drama. I think Trigger could do a really good job now that they've had the experience with Kiznaiver, and then later with Franks, and then Gridman too. Gridman goes super interpersonal as well too, so they're not past it. They're keeping it around. So, but I think it'd be cool to do a whole like big cast like they did here, like, you know, 6-7 characters, and then just have them eat each other apart.
So that was the longest ramble of Kiznaiver on YouTube, probably. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and check back in next episode where we go to our second half of our another long-winded discussion. It's about the same length as this, on Little Witch Academia, which is a lot more positive and gushy in both our discussion and the material itself.